Good afternoon. My name is Carly, and today I'm going to describe an ethical dilemma that I faced in my educational career. Before I begin my story, I'd first like to distinguish the difference between ethics and morality, as well as describe what an ethical dilemma entails. Ethics is the moral principles governing a person's behavior and actions. On the other hand, morality is the distinction between what's right, wrong, and fair amongst your behaviors and actions. An ethical dilemma occurs when a choice needs to be made between at least two options, neither of which is preferable. In other words, this is, you have two options, both with pros and cons, and you need to make a decision between which one is going to be the best in an ethical standpoint. So there are 6 steps in the decision-making model to making an ethical decision when you're in an ethical dilemma. The first is to identify the problem. Next, you need to collect information regarding the problem, state your options, apply ethical principles to those options, then make your decision and implement that decision with confidence. In the ethical decision-making process, there are many things that you need to consider. First off, you need to understand what the decision, action, or practice was that has taken place. Then you compare that decision, action, or practice with the prevailing norms of acceptability. Now, it's important to understand that the norms of acceptability are different depending on your situation. So the groups or place that you're in might have norms that are different from other groups or places that you're involved with. So then you need to recognize that value judgments are being made by someone based off of your ethical decision. This could include people judging you based off of your decision or based off of what they wanted to happen that you may not have decided. So my story I'd like to describe today is what I like to call the test scandal. So during one of my courses throughout my educational career, we had a student who stole the exam behind the professor's back during class while they were up at the board. Now, it sounds crazy. How did that ever happen? I still today do not have that answer. But my ultimate decision was that I just let it go. I didn't say anything about the student taking that test, and I never turned that student in. So the positives behind this decision included I maintained friendships with the other peers in my class, I gained their trust by not saying anything because everybody thought I would, and at the end of the day, there was no harm, no foul. Ultimately, what this means is that there weren't any repercussions for me and there weren't any repercussions for them. However, some of the negative facets were guilt by association, failing grades from students if I would have reported that student, and then ultimately a possible suspension, not only of the student who stole the exam, but possibly from the ones who saw the act happen and then ultimately said nothing at all. So going back to the models that I covered, my identifying the problem was that I witnessed a student steal the exam. The information I collected was that multiple students in the class needed that exam not only to pass the test, but to pass the class and then graduate from college. My options were to either turn the student in to the university, the dean, and the professor, or say nothing at all. I actually, looking back, did not apply any ethical principles to these options. The decision I made had no ethic grounds behind it. I made the decision of not saying anything, and then ultimately that's what I did. So, going to the second model, the behavior or act that was committed was a student stole the exam. Comparing with the norms of acceptability was that students accepted that. They wanted to hold the exam as well so that they could pass the class and graduate college. Now, looking at the value judgment and perceptions of the observer, I look at this as what my fellow peers would have observed my decision as. So, I would be considered a snitch for turning the student in, and, honestly, I would be highly frowned upon for doing so. So, in this, I broke all 3 responsibilities of making ethical decisions. Looking at this, society requires a business or a person to make economic ethical decisions. Now, typically, this entails profits and strategic decisions, but I reflect this back on the university. When employers hire someone from the institution, then they want to look to see that they're well prepared and have knowledge over the subject. In this instance, the students who cheated would not uphold those standards that businesses hold them to, and the university could lose profits in the long term. Next, the legal responsibilities include codified ethics, and they're also required by society. At the university, we're required to be fair, honest, and provide our own work. This involves not cheating. Once again, while I did not cheat, I allowed other students to cheat, knowingly that the student stole the exam. And then I broke the ethical responsibility because the action was not right, fair, or just. And while I wasn't involved in the scandal, I didn't do anything about it when I noticed the act occurred. It's expected of students to act in certain means, and obviously stealing an exam is not one of them. So when you look at this model, it's optimal to be right in the middle of upholding all three responsibilities. My decision caused negative impacts in each one of these areas. So my new course of action would be to turn the student in and not have that exam as our final exam and make the right choice. Now, by doing so, I'd uphold university integrity, also the economic responsibility. There'd be fair grades, meaning the grade that I earned by studying from myself would reflect upon my abilities, whereas other students may have received the same grade and not have worked as hard and tried to learn the material. And then I'd also have self-respect. This goes into the ethical responsibility to myself and to others, saying, I know this information and I did this and I did the right thing by turning the student in and making it fair for everyone. The negatives would be loss of friendships and a negative reputation. A lot of students would see me as a snitch, not being able to trust me with information they have, but at the end of the day, the positives outweigh the negatives as far as making the right choice in my ethical dilemma.